We're going to go ahead with the second panel, and Milt Heflin is going to be the moderator for that panel.
Okay, sorry for the delay. Valerie was working. He's working some problem back in Russia, so we're hopefully get him over here someplace where he can go ahead and start doing that. I'm gonna try something just a bit different. I'm coming from mission control and serving as a flight director. One of the things that my training has taught me is what time is it and what are we doing. We're keeping on time and on schedule and so forth. And I'm convinced that's probably impossible here to do that. And I also recognize this last time that there are a lot of smart people here, which I knew there would be. And I know you folks have got stuff on your mind and questions you'd like to ask and so forth. So I'm going to do this just a little bit differently. Instead of having each panel member just kind of go through and talk at the beginning, I want you to be thinking of something you would like to ask this panel. You folks sitting down here have a lot of experience. A number of them this is the Space Medicine Summit. So you might be thinking of the sort of things, keeping in mind in your program where you're listing the topics that this panel is supposed to be trying to cover with you and explore somewhat. It's listed there on the second page of your program. The thing that interests me the most, it's for near term for us, is the 6-man crew operations. I mean, that to me is the biggest challenge that we have facing us here in the near term. And so I'm just going to throw that out there as something that the health and well-being of the crew is part of space medicine. How are we going to find a way to operate doubling the size of the crew and maintaining all the creature comforts and so on and so forth. So I'm going to kind of throw that out here just as something that I like to see you and the panel discuss. And I'm going to try to, we'll see how this goes. We'll see if I can sort of keep it going. I don't think I'll be summarizing too much at the end for two reasons. I don't keep really very good notes anymore, and my memory's not as good as it used to be. And I'm also the last thing between you and lunch. So pay attention. I'm not sure you're going to need a summary. One of the things that really bothers me a lot is when you have meetings and you get done and somebody feels they got to go over every point again. And that nothing against my boss, Bill Gerstenmaier, at all, but we'll try to do that. I'm glad to see Joe Kerwin here. He was certainly in the space station at one time. My son also attempted to improve his golf game one time. I don't know whether that did any good or not, but did that. And I got to tell Walt Cunningham that, Walt, your mission plaque is still hanging in two places in mission control after we got you all fixed up. And that's an inside story. So let's do this. I like to open it. Where are the people with the microphones here? Good, very good. I'd like to start off with, from the audience here, I'd like for you to ask this panel, these folks who have a lot of experience in space medicine and so forth and operations, and I'd like to ask them a question and get this rolling, and we'll just see where it takes us. So let me have a first question from somebody. Bonnie.
Yes, I'd like to ask our representative from China to talk about their space medicine program.
Okay, very good. Let's see.
Would you like me to repeat it? Yes, please. I'd like to ask our representative from China to speak about their space medicine programs.
Okay, Dr. Chen, and welcome, sir. We're very pleased to have you today.
At noon, I will give a brief scan of Chinese space program. As for the space medicine program, I will give a few introduction. I'm from the Astronaut Center of China. We call it ACC. It's an institution responsible for the space medicine research in China's manned space program. The space medicine program in China keep the ways or keep the pies to the or follow the ways of Chinese space program. We call the three-step strategy. I will give an introduction at noon in my lecture. Actually, at the present time, we are just do the work on the breakthrough for the near Earth orbit flight for human being in China. So the space medicine at the moment is focused on some countermeasures to the short-term flight. Well, next step will pay more attention to the long-duration flight. Okay, thank you.
Follow-up on your name?
Well, I think I might have a second question while we're at it.
Yeah, here I am. It's a second question, actually, for the whole group, and it goes back to the bulleted topics, and I'm sure it'll go into the 6-person crew. But what research right now is translational to fractional gravity that we're doing on the space station? If we're looking at long periods of time in 1/6 G at the moon or 1/3 G in Mars, what's the translational research that gives us information on all of the human physiological changes? Or how will we find it if we don't have it?
Smith or Dave or...
Sure. Yeah, that's a great question, and I think a lot of the work that we're doing on the station is zero-G specific, but in terms of translating that beyond low Earth orbit, there will be zero-G transit time, so of course it's relevant for the zero-G transit times. And then beyond that, we're all experts, because of course our experience with partial gravitational environments is very limited and occurred in another millennium. So we need to be able to look at the work that we're doing on the station, and I would submit, look at that in the context of exploration enabling research. What questions can we ask relative to 1/6 G in orthostatic intolerance, in osteoporosis, in muscle wasting, in long duration radiation exposure, in nutritional balance, and do those experiments in the environment on board the space station and plan those to be able to be continued in a partial gravitational environment wherever that may be.
Yeah, and my name's Smith Johnson. It's a real pleasure to be here. I think the big part where I spend a lot of my time are the G transitions. When we go to the G and when we go to zero G and when we come back, and it doesn't get any worse from 1G to 0G to 0G to 1G. So if we can do a good job there on landing and put the parameters, put the metrics there to measure how well we're doing, then as we go to the moon and then go to Mars, we should be able to do a fairly good job there.
See, that transition is a really interesting phenomenon because, in fact, physiologically, what we have a huge opportunity to study is not just the human adaptation to microgravity, it's the physiological transition between gravitational states. And understanding that phenomenon of adaptive change physiologically will help us destination independent, wherever we want to go.
And I might add that the transition from microgravity to Earth can be done in a way where you can be surrounded by doctors and technicians willing to snip little pieces off of your body for the sake of science. And perhaps we have an undersampled system. Huge transients occur during this time, and we might do, say, a blood take a couple hours after landing and then a blood take a week later, and there's huge transients that occur, and maybe we ought to be on semi-continuous blood takes. And I hate to say that from somebody that might be subjected to these, and I know my crewmates will probably be throwing darts at my pictures if I suggest that, but there's huge physiological transients that occur when you go from Earth into space and when you go from space back into Earth. When you go from Earth into space, we don't have the facilities to do these really detailed biochemical analyses. We do when we come back to Earth, and I think that being a lab rat is part of what it means to being a crew member, and there's much to be pride from the souls of people that come back from space, particularly when you arrive on Earth and you have access to all the kinds of medical research facilities that's available.
Let me be, Valerie, you were out a while ago when this question was asked, and it was a question having to do with the space station, the zero gravity research that we do there. How can that be applied or thought to be applied to the like 1/6 on the moon and that sort of thing? That was the question. So Valerie, might you have a comment? Let's see.
Перед тем, как говорить о Луне,
prior to speaking about the moon,
отметить
I would like
проблемы сегодняшнего дня.
to mention some issues of today. My name is Valery Bogomolov. I am from the Institute of Medical and Biological Problems in Russia, and I work in medical support for the Russian space program. Without speaking about the moon, I want to say that within the 10 years that we've been working together, we created a great potential of cooperation, and we have a huge volume of materials that can be used in the area of safety of a human being in space. We do adhere to the international requirements for human health. We have joint standards and joint requirements on the environment in space for the human being to be there. And now we are talking about a 6-crew situation on board of the station. The experience that we have so far, the integrated capabilities of both medical personnel on the ground and on the station will no longer be applicable, because we are talking right now segment by segment support, medical support of their crew members using only national resources. Integrated system is no longer existent. This experience that we have had so far, it is being rejected at the moment. And I think this is negative, this is incorrect. I am talking about the use of on-board equipment for physical exercise. I am talking about separate food intake for the crew. Each partner is supposed to use only his or her national resources for astronauts or cosmonauts on the station, not integrated resources. This statement from the agencies, from the program administration, I believe is negative, is wrong. Up to now, the engine of station assembly and science was the scientific research, medical research. And right now, we are making a step back. We're not going forward. Somebody said that, 2 steps back. Actually, probably we will be corrected in the future. I hope it will be changed. But I believe this is wrong. This is the negative aspect of today's usage of the International Space Station. Well, there is a good thing also here. Well, the thing is that we have more scientific resources right now on the station than before. Multiplied. We do have the equipment, we have more equipment, more resources, more capabilities, but we do not have common science programs. We only have national programs. Integration of the resources of the station that we have I believe is important. For example, the usage of ultrasound equipment on ISS, Dr. Dulchansky, Dr. Sarkisian and their colleagues are looking at dynamic effects using the newest methods and technologies available, and some countermeasures are also being researched. For example, we have equipment which is called bracelet in Russian. If we break up the station, we've been putting the station together, we've been assembling it, and we are kind of breaking it together now. And if we are going to break up the station into national parts of it, we will not be talking about joint missions to the moon and further. Only by bringing the resources together, medical staff, scientists, engineers, only then we can achieve the goals we have. Thank you.
Excellent comments, concerns. So panel, ideas. What do we do to overcome the problems that we have recognized relative to lack of commonality, perhaps struggling to share certain things and so forth. So what are some thoughts from the panel?
Well, I think my name is Volker Dahlmann from European Space Agency. I think what Valery Bogomolov said is right. We are at a point where we have to fear that we are breaking the station apart into national elements. But I'm not that much worried as you are, Valery. I think we are on a good track to also get the team back together. Because especially in the medical domain, I think it would be the worst case scenario if we would really set up borders and limitations and would not share the resources and the capabilities we all have. And I'm rather confident that within the medical domain, I think we were, and we can be proud of that, we were one of the first within the ISS community that really started with an international committees, different boards and panels that really thought about how do we execute medicine, how do we define our requirements in a global fashion. And I think we are still the same people around the table sitting in those different boards. But yes, indeed, you are right. I think it is true. There are certain interests coming from different space agencies to pursue certain avenues and certain interests. But I think that's also why we have been assigned and elected to be the representatives of our agencies in such boards and panels to also fight those maybe political pressures that we are facing. I fully believe that the only way that we can progress in space and in space medicine is by true international collaboration. If that is really a equal partner collaboration that has to be seen, I think we also ran into some issues by always saying even a small partner like ESA, 8.6%, that's not very much compared to the big community that ESA is representing. But should we have the same voting rights, the same rights and responsibilities than the big partners that put much more money on the table? Those are things we have to see if we continue like that, or if we are better looking into what are the strengths and weaknesses of the different partners. Where can we bring something on the table that no other partner has, and then having a full responsibility for a certain hardware or scientific experiment on board. So that's just a reaction to that 6-person crew. I think it is an issue, but I think we are on the right way to progress.
Let me jump in here. Hang on, Walt, just a second. Hang on. My experience, Volker, has been at the working level. You know, the folks really doing the work, they get along great, and they can go do this somewhere between those doing the work and those that are making some decisions higher up. I think this is where I see some of the difficulty. It's the higher levels of our organizations. I'm not sure how you fix that. Walt, you were going to comment too.
Well, you've slipped off into what I consider a political problem. And returning to the subjects of what your research is, I would like to say that I think that you've properly focused on the zero gravity and the long duration. In mathematics, we'd say we've got the problem bounded. We do have a fair amount of experience at 1.6G and at zero gravity, and to the best of my knowledge, anything we do is going to be probably in between those two limits. So I would hate to see an effort made where you had to reproduce everything we've got in zero gravity, reproduce those same experiments in 1/6 or 1/3 gravity. I think it's not justified. I think your focus is properly on long duration and the zero gravity. And the transition, excuse me, I don't mean zero gravity. I meant the transitions and the long duration.
You know, I've got to comment on that. Well, I totally agree with you. I think one of the challenges with science, especially from an operator's perspective when we're out there doing a lot of stuff and we have to do science, is building the experiments into our day-to-day activities. So if we go back to the moon, while we're implementing our countermeasures that have been developed on the space station, we're not recreating the experiments, but we're data collecting while we're doing the treadmills on the moon or whatever we're doing. We're collecting data in that whole process, and we're enabling the environment to share that data internationally. And I go back to a comment I made earlier. We're doing this, in my opinion, on behalf of humanity. So I think it behooves all the spacefaring nations of the world to embrace programs like the longitudinal study of astronaut health, to share that information in a non-attributable manner internationally. I'm trying to teach a course at McMaster University right now to undergraduate students. There is no textbook of space medicine that talks in detail about the frequency of events on orbit because it's very difficult to find that information. There's great books out there on space medicine, but fundamentally it all starts with the events that have taken place in space.
Okay, up here. Let's.
About some of these other players contributing to the cost of some of these things.
Great suggestion.
And right behind you, go ahead, Walt.
Walt Cunningham, I was going to say, how about some of these other players that are you going to use this information? How about them contributing to some of the cost of the information?
So it strikes me this is not only an issue of international cooperation, but there's something more fundamental in here which we just uncovered. It's an integration of flight docs, astronauts, scientists, ground controllers, and decision makers. And as a scientist, I can tell you that's vastly more frustrating to work with than is working with Europe or Russia or anything else. We have to find a way to integrate through our system. And up till now, the barriers to that, despite a lot of good work by a lot of good people, it strikes me, have been an inability to sort of consummate what the commitment is to the scientific projects on board. As we go long duration with many more flyers and need to answer these long duration questions, serial sampling regularly, etc., is going to be critical. It's obvious the scientists can't just impose this on astronauts. Flight docs have to be part of it. Mission operations has to be part of it. So I'd like comments from the rest of you on how do we get this integration more thorough now so we really don't miss and have the problem Dave just talked about, which is, you know, what are the conditions that occur over time in long-duration flight? Because time is a critical dimension now in long-duration flight in terms of sampling scientifically.
Okay, before the panel, is this connected to where he's coming from, or?
No, this is actually getting back to Dr. Dunbar.
All right, hang on just a second. If you don't, hang on a second, gentlemen.
I was just going to comment that a crew is typically enthusiastic about doing experiments, even if it means snipping something off of yourself, if we understand why we are doing it. And if it just shows up, you know, lick this piece of paper 3 times a day and stick it back in a box. Sure, we'll do that, but the more we know in terms of why we need to do this, what the value of it, the more the crew understands the fundamental basis of these experiments, the greater enthusiasm I think you'll find that they have for periodically sticking themselves with pins and needles.
Well, one thing I think I heard said, but are we having difficulty internationally, collectively, deciding on what we need to do from a space medicine standpoint? I mean, it's fundamental to, you got to decide. Everybody's got to agree upon, you know, what you're doing. Otherwise, you are going to generate conflict and barriers and so forth.
It's just in the last year we started to have 5 full-up mission controls and trying to integrate that just from a day-to-day level of operational space. And one of the biggest values of the space station that was brought up earlier was we're actually there. We're actually living there day to day. And to answer Dave's question, I think what you need is an example of a problem that not only transcends the problem of the astronauts are having in orbit, but our flight controllers are having in orbit. My long-duration experience is being the expedition. I think a lot of us did the Expedition 16 mission, which was probably the busiest mission to date, with 3 shuttle dockings, 2 progress dockings, 17 EVAs, the ATV, logistics module from Japan, and we had to integrate all those folks in about 6 months. And that was with a 3-person crew, and next month we're going to a 6-person crew. And I know you guys don't want to hear a doctor talk about sleep, but circadian rhythm changes, not just for our crews, but slam shifts, which are going to happen, as we speak. I've been working this last night for the 127 crew and the Expedition 19 crew, are a huge problem, not just for our crews, but also for our ground control team. They're shift workers. They lose on average 5 to 7 hours less sleep a week. We also take care of them in our occupational medicine clinic. And that is a great area to study, and we've started doing that. We've instigated, as far as lessons learned from this mission, we've instigated educational programs. We've instituted objective ground testing protocols for medications, so that we don't have an astronaut that we can't wake up in orbit, or that gets the maximum amount of sleep for the right amount of time. We've got these little things called ActiWatches, which can give us objective data on the amount of time we've slept. I know that Peggy Whitson slept, on average, for her 6 months in space, about 30 minutes less than she did on the ground. But during her last month in space, and she's given me permission to say this, she averaged about 5.5 hours of sleep. That's not good. And I bet our ground controllers during that time was a similar situation. And because of that, we just, this last week, instituted a multinational subgroup of our multinational panel to go and put this together with flight directors, flight controllers, and astronauts, cosmonauts, and flight surgeons, and we're going to have our first meeting here in the next month. So there's a real-life example of bringing international cooperation, because we have a problem that we all need to solve. And it not only helps us, it spins off to our general population, to our aviation population. The flight that went down in New York, it's now, looks like it was fatigue that caused that. The FAA doesn't even allow sleep medications for travel. So that's a problem that can help us, help the astronauts, and help the rest of the world.
I just have a really quick comment that I'd like to throw in here. Within all the space agencies of the world, we would like to say that we do not take chances flying in space. We manage risk. To manage risk means we need to make data-driven decisions. In the field of life science, often we don't have the opportunities to get the data that we're able to get if we had more opportunities to be able to make the appropriate risk management decisions, as Smith is alluding to. So I would strongly encourage all of us to think about ways of integrating our science. I think every astronaut in space should be wearing an actigraph. How hard is that? So we've got to challenge ourselves to be able to get access to the data that we need to be able to make the appropriate risk management decisions.
I'd like to add, just what do you do with the data when it's all collected, and how do other people get access to the data to look at it to try to make decisions? And the data archiving, we've got heaps of data from space station. How do you correlate it? And there's this shroud, I'll call it, of medical privacy that does seem to complicate researchers getting access to the data. And maybe the expectations of flight crew is we'll make the best effort to erase your name from the data, but if somebody somewhere wants to look at the data and can put enough attributes together, who ate this meal, who was over the age of 45, who was up there for 3.2 months, if they put all this data together, they'll be able to figure out who the names are. And I think from a crew perspective, we just have to realize for the medical benefit of the data, somebody may discover that this particular data set was attached to your name.
Okay, look, hang on a minute. Now, I know there's something, I'm not going to forget you. But I know there's somebody here in the group that can address what Don asked or comment about the data and how does it get dispersed. So Dennis, why don't you tackle that a little bit? A microphone over here on this side. Have we?
I'll just start talking till the microphone gets.
Well, they've got a translator. Hang on. We got to. Let's be fair here. And so now you've lost your microphone, haven't you? Yeah.
Of course, we have been aware of the need to balance privacy, which is guaranteed under the Privacy Act of 1974 of the individuals, with the need to access the data for legitimate uses for some very long time. And as of the last few years, and we've been on a campaign to make sure that as much non-attributable data can be put into the public places as possible. I've got websites for you to go find that. And we've also, as late as last January, gone through an exercise of making sure everyone has available the process to request data, even if it is attributable, for legitimate causes, for need to know. Those processes are in place, and in fact, requests have been made and granted for that data. But you'll have to recognize that there will still always be a need to protect privacy under the law.
Uh-oh. Well, all right, go ahead. Charlie?
I'll pass it to Jeff.
Okay. I'd like to get one of those microphones over here to this gentleman. Yeah, I'm gonna. Yeah, before what he wants to ask, we get so far away from it. We're not too far away.
Mine's a data comment, if I can just make it, because we're going around one thing that I think Don's talking about. Data for the experimenters is important. Data for the guinea pig is critical, and I say the same thing I've been saying since 1980. A data point of 1 is a data point. We are never going to have ends of 1,000 in the space program. And so you experimenters have got to be willing to share your data with us and let us know what a data set of 2 says. It's a preliminary assessment, but it's based on all the data we have. And I think you're talking around what crew members are interested in. We're interested in what did you learn from a data point of 2.
All right, Jeff.
Thanks. I just wanted to follow up on that because a couple of real quick points I think that can demonstrate some progress. Over the last year, we've formed what we call a human system risk board because we're trying to approach it, as Dave was saying, as risk management. And we think the total problem database will turn out to be somewhere in the neighborhood of 60 to 70 human system risks that we manage. In that board, we sit down, Dennis and I co-chair that. We bring to the table the best data we have about that risk, the research data, the MedOps data. It's a board comprised of all our technical decision makers. And so we've, just in the last year, we've turned things off, we've turned them on, and we've modified protocols. So we're just getting a good start to it, but we also have a good database that serves as a knowledge capture tool. In the future, that'll be accessible as well, both where we are at a certain point in time. You can take a snapshot of the risk today and then move on. One quick case in point, what Charlie's talking about, we've had cases of some eye changes on orbit, a long-duration flight, just a couple, but it's something we've never seen before. And so by having this risk forum, sharing that data, it's not a study, and we're already convening a summit about that particular problem because we think it's significant enough to go ahead. So appreciate the comments. I just wanted people to know there is, I think, some real good progress being made in how we handle our data, even negative data. If a experiment doesn't show something, that's still good information, so someone doesn't repeat the mistake.
And we sit down and with the flight surgeons and the astronauts and the researchers, we can also, if there's for instance, ActiveWatch, if there's an operational type research going on, we sign agreements that it's okay to share this information. So I can actually, if we're about to do a big slam shift and I want to know the last week how much they've slept, they'll download that data. So we can do that real time. And as far as an N of 1 goes, I've also been given permission to tell you this, that there's an N of 1 of a female crew member who's been up in space for 2 long-duration periods and had much less bone loss on her first mission. And that was a mission where she was doing a renal stone experiment and taking potassium citrate, and that may be just a very simple countermeasure for retarding bone loss. That's very preliminary, but that's that sort of information when you sit down and sit down with all the researchers and pull that together in a debrief, and then that's something that can make a difference down the road.
Okay. Please. And folks, please identify yourself too.
Sure, Rick Schuring, from NASA. I want to get back to Dr. Dunbar's question because actually I think there's some things we could say that the audience panel could sink their teeth in. You know, what research on ISS is translational to partial G environments? Well, to understand what the problems are in partial G environments, you have to go back and find out what those were. And I think we've got a pretty good idea of what impacts to crew health and performance we've had, at least on the moon. And one thing that comes to mind is all the issues associated with sleep. You know, crews describe sleep as 2 hours of nodding off at best on the lunar surface, with 2 exceptions. The work that Smith and David and Lauren and the BHP group are doing with ActiWatch and stuff like that is directly beneficial to what we've experienced on the moon and what we will probably continue to experience on the moon. And that those experiments on ISS, both ground-based and the ISS experience, will certainly benefit that. All the things we learned about EVA suit issues associated with lunar surface operations, I'm sure are being worked out and being, as a platform for testing on ISS to try to figure that out to make sure we get it right the next time around. And then probably the most recent example was the crew work day. The experience on the ISS actually helped us, I think, win the argument. Jeff, Pete Barr and I had to defend the Constellation crew workday requirement before the Flight Operation Board. We used the ISS paradigm. They argued for the shuttle paradigm, but we won based on what the ISS experiences with the crew's sleep requirements, with their pre-sleep, post-sleep needs, et cetera, and that really was a direct benefit of what crews have experienced on ISS that are benefiting us in Constellation. So I see immediate translational benefits from the ISS experience into Constellation. And, given more time, we could talk about the problems associated with lunar surface operations. We've got that knowledge now, how we could actually design experiments on ISS to help us give us those answers. So I think there's plenty there. Just need to dig around a little bit more. And the data mining issue, getting back to what Dr. Davis brought up, we've used a lot of that data in a non-attributable fashion to publish some articles now to look at some problems that we've had. So we're mining that data. We've developed our medical condition list based off that evidence to design the Constellation medical operation CONOP. So that data is being used aggressively right now, and I think it's benefiting what we're going to do for Moon Mars. Thanks.
I guess this is a question for Jeff, and can you hear me over there? I'm Amy Cronenberg. I'm wondering, is your Human System Risk Board an international board? Or are you only dealing with NASA data? I'll speak louder. Can you hear me now? Okay.
And you're asking this of Jeff over here, right?
Yes, Jeff Davis, yes. But it...
Yeah, that's a great question because we were just having that discussion because we're just 1 year in inception of this, and it started within Johnson Space Center. Then it started tying other centers together, and then other federal agencies. And so we think we can enable that to be an international board for most topics because it would be an easy way to share data and share experiences. And so it's been up and running on WebEx and a dial-in phone call, and it's worked pretty well.
Because it goes back to the point that was made earlier by our Russian colleague about different prescriptions being used by different agencies for their representatives in space, and a way to learn about how effective they are, if nothing else, and to harmonize them, if at all possible, to make it easier for the crews to be working in a harmonious fashion, would be to be able to integrate the information that comes back through those risk boards.
Hey, hang on a minute. Give her the mic. Now, how do we solve that?
I don't know, but
okay,
I needed to put it out there.
But don't you think, Why couldn't we, as a space medicine community, pick a problem? Maybe that's it. I don't know. Just pick one and see if we can't come together internationally to get everybody to agree. I mean, we got to start somewhere.
Если можно, я бы немножко пояснил.
With your permission, I would expand on my idea somewhat.
Yes, sir. Go ahead.
As far as risk assessment for long duration is very important as far as building a system of medical system to assure the safety of the crew is concerned. The topic of this discussion is lessons and accomplishments. Among accomplishments, we can list the fact that we have a fairly good understanding of the risks inherent in long-duration flight and in the course of crew member operations. In the upcoming stage, starting 2011, when the orbiter is no longer going to be flying, we will have a few years when the crews are only going to be delivered and returned with Soyuz vehicles. And the Soyuz are being used as rescue vehicles as well in the event of some sort of an emergency. It would seem to me that recovery from medical risks or mitigation of medical risks is related primarily to the sufficiency of medical resources aboard the station to monitor and maintain crew health. The second prerequisite is appropriate management of the process. When I expressed concern regarding the diversity of the per-segment support, I proceeded primarily from my concern that there will be an increased medical risk related to psychology, related to the fact that the crews on orbit sometimes find themselves in unequal circumstances with respect to resources. So if there is a lot of science hardware and a lot of capability on board, we might still have a risk related to the delivery or return of research results to the ground, because the Soyuz has limited capability that way. It would seem to me that life will introduce corrections into the situation that is related to this segment-wise support and responsibility. But for that to occur, we would need to get a poll of the scientific community evaluating the situation. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
After all these years, I sure would hate to get in the habit of agreeing with Dr. Bogomolov. But I think that he's right that going to a segmented operations is a danger to our future cooperation. And this is something that needs to be solved at a political level, as Walt Cunningham says, to say we're going to have continued operations that allow the systems to work in harmonious operation as Amy has brought together. So I'm going to propose a method to try to do that. I'm going to ask the panel, what is the most important problem for our enabling space medicine to progress into the future and enable future space missions? Which ones are showstoppers for the future, and which ones do we need to solve in the space station now? Can you tell me what problem do you identify as one that we cannot currently go to Mars at the present moment because of uncertainty in our medical knowledge that we could solve in the space station?
and let's don't lose. I don't want to lose the fact that what you just mentioned at the beginning, having to do with, yes, sir. This program has never, in the entire time of flying humans in space, politics have always been a part of it, and always will be a part of it. And if you can ever figure out a way to solve that, everything else is easy. But in the context of that, I mean, go ahead. So, panel members, Dave?
Got two quick comments on that, and then Smith maybe would join in. I think one of the issues fundamentally is that as we go forward and explore space, we've got to get this data somehow and understand how our treatment paradigms and our diagnostic protocols actually work in a microgravitational environment where the pathophysiology of disease may be different. And we don't fully understand that. Where in fact we have very little data on actual pharmacological efficacy of drugs. We don't understand the volume of distribution, we don't understand the half-life. We basically take terrestrial dosing protocols and hope that they're going to work in space in a microgravitational environment. So I think there's huge opportunities to start doing the research that will help us get those answers for microgravity and partial gravitational environment. And just to quickly finish, I'll say another huge challenge is inventory management. Providing the appropriate capabilities to support a 6-person crew. On one of my missions, we ran out of an antibiotic, and I ended up borrowing an antibiotic from another kit. On a mission to Mars, this is going to be a very significant challenge, having the inventory you need to be able to support a crew for 3 years.
To answer your question, Jeff, I think to go to the moon for a short period of time, we don't have any problems with that. We've done that. And I think we found that the magnitude of a solar flare is much less. But to go and to live there for 6 months, to colonize, which is what I really think we need to do before we even think about going on a Martian project, we've got to go live on the surface, just like we're learning to live up in orbit. I think radiation is one of your bigger problems. It's one of our problems that I worry about with my crew members, not now, but 10, 15 years from now. And it's an occupational model. Rich has talked about healthcare for life, and we need to be monitoring these folks, and we don't quite have the tools yet to do that, whether it's biodosimetry, whether it's all the suite of scanning and monitoring we do medically for these folks. But one thing that's going to come out, and very quickly, and it's going to explode over the next couple of years, is going to be genetic susceptibility. For $1,000, you can go get a gene profile just down the street that will look at about 1,300 genes and about 600,000 base pairs of your genome. And you can get your entire genome done in about 4 years for the same price. That's 6 billion base pairs typed and then compared to the phenotype, in other words, what the disease is. And what does that mean? It just means that the power and the associations of those gene SNPs and what they mean is going to increase dramatically, to the point that we might be able to even know neurovestibularly why someone reacts this way after being in space 6 months on a 1G environment versus someone who acts this way. And there's a 5-fold difference in the response there. And how someone is maybe more susceptible to radiation, to ionizing radiation. I mean, we're not to the point where we're using genetic screening to say you can't do anything. But does anybody in this room question the fact if someone had a BRCA1 or 2 gene and has an 85% chance of colon or ovarian or breast cancer in their lifetime, and wants to go to Mars, or even wants to do 2 or 3 space station missions where they're going to get a factor of 5 times the amount of radiation you'd get as an OSHA standard worker on the ground. Would we keep them from going? I don't know. We at least need to do informed consent so they know. And as we get more and more knowledge about that, we'll probably have to use that as a criteria for no-go, or at least informed consent. So that's an area that we could all, try to work together on. And I think we do. I think we do in all our international meetings. We meet every 6 months. We have a face-to-face meeting with our international medical partners. We have a telecon, almost weekly with our space station participants. I mean, it's a very robust system of checks and balances there.
Smith, could we, I'm harping on this some because I try to think simple sometimes.
Milt, can I?
Volker, yes, sir, go ahead.
Jeff, there's another element I think that's also related to our profession. Our as space physicians, or however you want to call us, flight surgeons, and all related fields. How do we select those physicians in the future? How do we educate them? How do we make them aware of all the space medicine related issues that come along? How will our profession change? Will we become astronauts that fly with them? Will we stay on the ground? How do we provide information to the physician that is in the spacecraft or on Mars or on Moon? So that's another unresolved mystery, I would say. I think we still do not know enough about basic clinical medicine, like a family physician, in executing his or her job. And I think that is the education part, but also in bridging the gap between human life science, basic research, and applied research and identifying the operational needs, the space medicine needs, and driving some of the science into a direction that we as a medical community and caring physicians can benefit. I think this is also one element that is still not taken care of in some agencies to the degree it should be. Maybe on the NASA side already, bridging the gap and having more intense collaboration between life science and medical operations. But in ESA, for example, we're just starting. And also there, we come in all the areas like data sharing and confidentiality of data, etc. But we have to resolve that issue to really benefit and move our profession forward into the next generation of spaceflight.
Not to mention what we have to learn from the Chinese.
Okay, I will have a few words to say. That's about, first of all, I think for the ISS, because China has not participated in this mission, but we noticed that many achievements have been made for 10 years. I think we should pay some attention to the chronobiology is very important to be focused on, I think. So we put forward our concept is a space chronobiology, not only focused on the sleep, but from the molecular cell level to the organ and also to the behavior for all the human. The second is I think the ISS so far is set a very good example for the international cooperation for the all nations. But from now on, the scientists should start to think about that to make some standards for or provide for a platform for the more nations, more people to participate in this kind of cooperation. So the standards should be stretched from the space vehicle design also to the crew members from all of the countries, such as the life habit, especially including the language, just some specials just mentioned, and also we think we should give a more and more liberate a platform for more people or nations to attend or to be involved in this event. So I think China will make some efforts to, and also we hope to have more cooperations with the countries from the space-related countries. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Don, you kept looking at me. I don't know whether you were... Vladimir, did you have any...
Вы извините, что я опять здесь за этим столом.
I will apologize for being at this table a second time this morning without a medical degree.
Вы знаете, вот
You
первая
know,
часть конференции
the first part of the
произвела на
conference
меня очень положительное впечатление своей радушностью
created a
и
very good impression in me in
Сейчас, когда я
so far it
услышал
was very friendly
информацию
and warm. Now
о
that
тенденции разъединения,
I have heard information about separation and the trend towards segment-wise support with respect to resupply and material contributions and other planes of separation. Even if I don't have a medical degree, I have an idea that someone wanted to introduce a political virus on board the station. But what the outcome for psychology is going to be, let's just imagine that a crew of 6 will split into 2 or 3 crews. So we are going back to a spirit of Cold War of sorts. I have been involved in whatever it is I am doing since 1976 as a cosmonaut and so on. I have never ever seen anything that would separate us. Cross my heart and hope to die. But in this situation, the positive political component of the situation is the Soyuz Apollo program. That was a great political undertaking which helped us get to where we are now, helped us to talk and to exchange opinions. I also wanted to add some technical items, but I don't think I should. I also think that managers that are running the International Space Station are smart. They're talented, and I think that common sense will prevail. I understand that there is certain jealousy as a risk. One country contributes more, a second country contributes less, a third country does not contribute at all. There are many countries that are involved in the International Space Station. We are doing a planetary thing, a global thing, and we're doing the planet a service, and I don't have an understanding of how we can separate the station crew into several. And Mike Foale will bear me out. When we flew STS-86 and we sat down at the same table on Mir, 7 people from Discovery or Atlantis and 2 people from the Mir crew. That was a unified single crew, and no one even had an idea about separating. If you ask me, to make a long story short, I would be very much against this idea of separation. Thank you. Without my medical degree.
Hang on just a minute. Vladimir, excellent. Very well said. A while ago I made the comment that I have sensed, and more than sensed, I have experienced, I have recognized that at the come get to work level, these things don't exist typically. It's somewhere else. And if anybody in this group today is learning something, I don't necessarily take this as negative, what we are learning today. It's an awareness of these sort of things that go on. And the more of us in positions that can influence this and be aware of it, well, maybe we can solve it or at least approach it. It's when you don't know something. And if you don't know something's broke, or you can't pay any attention to it. But this is real. What he's talking about, what I mentioned a while ago too, it is real. I see it a lot, and it's very surprising. And Walt, you had a comment.
Yeah, Vladimir, I agree. It'd be nice if we could keep politics out of this, but in spite of everything, it's going to rear its ugly head from time to time. But maybe we can try to keep it out of the medical aspects and the science here. I think it was Smith was talking about genome profiles for people. Frankly, I think genome profiles are useless for flight crews unless they in fact are used to determine who goes and who doesn't go. and we can't afford to have the politically correct solution that says, well, we don't want to impose it on them. I think it's knowledge that has to be used, especially for something like going to Mars.
And there's a political aspect to that also. If you do go get your gene profile, you cannot, and it gets out, it cannot be used held against you. Again, you can keep your health insurance. You can't be denied health insurance from your gene profile. But there's no laws on the book.
Flying to Mars is more important than the health insurance.
Yeah, well, except for life insurance and disability. So you can lose those from your gene profile as the law stands right now. So we need to get that changed. We just need some political change and make sure our new administrator hears some of this.
Okay, let's see. Help me. Somebody raise your hand. Got a question. Back here in the back, please.
Jay Bucky from Dartmouth. Getting back to the theme of accomplishments, what would you say is the most significant advance in how we maintain people in space that's occurred over the past 10 years?
Great question. All right. I think that was for the panel. Yeah, you guys.
I think our exercise countermeasures. I think our ability to do in-flight analysis, whether it's bone markers, turnovers, our ability to have diagnostic tools like ultrasound. I think those are big. Our radiation monitoring capabilities. But, and I think Larry mentioned earlier, I think we learned some stuff from Neurolab from our short arm centrifuge. I think neurovestibular is an area that we need a little more work on for especially on a ballistic reentry. That can be kind of challenging. Although we just showed that a crew can egress quite well from a capsule, but not if it landed in the water. Okay, that would be a problem, I think, whether it's a Soyuz or whether it's a CEV. Getting out of a vehicle that landed in the water after ballistic reentry would not be a pretty picture. And that's something that we need to, that would get me very concerned.
And I'd just like to add a comment to that. I agree with Smith totally. It's all about exercise. But one of the things that the exercise program did that's very unique is this concept of individualizing prescriptive protocols. So from the exercise program, that's expanded out to the other breadth of countermeasures that we have, that the repertoire of countermeasures is now individualized to the crew member. And not only do we have the breadth of countermeasures that we can individualize, we monitor health on orbit and we can intervene when a crew member has a problem. We've seen that in cases of hearing loss where a crew member will be positioned by a fan. All of a sudden we notice that they've got a hearing deficit. We can intervene and have an appropriate response as a result. So I would submit that as we go forward back to the moon, this concept of optimizing an individual's ability to perform in space, recognizing the countermeasure you use for a 50-year-old male astronaut will be different than the countermeasure you use for a 55-year-old female astronaut to prevent osteoporosis. And it gets into this concept of genetic susceptibility, that by understanding our genetic profile, we may actually be able to develop genetic countermeasures.
And there's one important part that we learned this morning. Food seems to play a big role. So just to let you know that ESA at least is providing food from 2 Michelin star cooks now to the ISS, so from France and Germany.
Is that a joke?
No, it's true, yeah. It's true, yeah.
They just have to warm it up so they don't think the fuzzy fat.
Charlie Bolden again. If I can go back to Jay's question and just expand on it, NASA has had an agreement with the National Institutes of Health for a couple of years now. Is there one thing that you all could identify that is a significant achievement that is valuable to people here on Earth from space?
Sure.
Yeah, I personally, and I apologize because this is my area right now, but I think the spin-off of space robotics into the field of surgery has created huge insights that we've not had before. This is really a direct contribution of space robotic technology, which is now a multi-billion-dollar industry in the U.S. It changes the face in which we do surgery, and it's interesting that in the field of space robotics, things that we consider fundamental, like the ability to drive a robotic arm from the ground, are not embraced in the current generation of surgical robots. The Da Vinci S surgical system cannot be remotely controlled. So I think that terrestrial robotics has got a lot to learn from space, and it's a great example of this.
In danger of running off into a ditch here, I would like to kind of add to that a little bit. So, Dave, absolutely. Well, why the hell is that so hard to? Why isn't that exciting, or why doesn't it mean more? When people deal with how much money to give this agency and what to do, I don't want. What's the problem?
The problem is we have not shared the story. You go up to the Hill and you talk to a member of Congress, and they start off and they're not a supporter of the space program. They say, tell me one good thing the space program is going to. You said, you know what? The U.S. is now a leader in a multi-billion-dollar worldwide industry in creating surgical robotics. And they go, wow, I didn't know that. And you know, I think what's really exciting about this is the capability of looking at biophotonics devices, which are terrestrially developed to create laser scalpels that can operate at the cellular level. We're now talking about doing intracellular surgery robotically. And that element of it is not a direct spin-off of space technology, but we have to share the story.
Not to mention only 40% of Congress has ever been out of the country.
Okay, next question. Back up here. Yeah.
Marcelo Vázquez for NSBRI. Great comment. One issue that also we need to recognize some limitations of the platform, ISS, and one recurrent issue is radiation. So one of the big concerns that everyone knows about this is potential effect of galactic cosmic rays for lunar and Mars missions. And the ISS is a good platform for some life sciences objects, but not for this kind of thing. We have a lot of uncertainties that affect galactic cosmic rays, and likely astronauts are protected by magnetic field. So ISS has been a good platform for some areas of radiation dosimetry, for example, and some biodosimetry measurements, but still there is not a good platform when we're talking about long terms outside the magnetic field. So there is an issue that needs to be taken into account. So with all the contributions ISS, still we have a lot of uncertainties in terms of radiation effects, and we need more platforms beyond the magnetic field to understand the risks.
Down here in the front, please.
Thank you. I'm Carl Dirch, Athena Global of Canada. I'm wondering if the panel isn't taking too short-term a view as it discusses these aspects of making progress in space medicine. When people moved out of Africa, it took 40,000 years to settle the continents, and they met all sorts of different things, cold weather, different diets, and everything like this, and a lot of people perished, but it took a long time. If we talk about going to space, it's going to take even longer. So should we be worrying so much about these details of projection rather than getting on with it?
I have a comment on that one. You know, in the break, we were talking about the question Jay asked earlier about what are the unique aspects of the space station. One of the very unique elements of the space station is not the international collaboration. We do that on the ground. Is not doing research together. We do that in the Antarctic. It's the fact that we're doing it in space, and we're doing it together as the human species, because ultimately this is about humans asking the fundamental question, are we going to expand in the solar system, or are we going to stay on one planet? And it gets back to your point that biologically, to be able to do that, this will not be an evolutionary biological phenomenon. This will be based on technology, that we will use technology to enable humans to live on another planetary body within our solar system. And I would submit, if we're going to go to Mars, we're going to rotate crews. So for the first time in the human species, we'll have humans 24/7, 365 Martian days a year on the surface of another planet. And that is an incredible thing. And when it comes back to talking about the various government representatives, since technology is required to support this, it drives the economic engine of the spacefaring nations by producing and developing those technologies.
I'd like to add that humans' ability to, or a drive to explore, always seems to go ahead of our ability to solve the medical issues that follows in the wake of exploration. And I think space will follow that paradigm. We can't try to solve every issue we could think about with human physiology in space before we continue our explorations in space. There will be some things we just have to figure out as we do it.
And back to the 50,000 years, I think that's about the time they trace back the genetic trait to increase communication capabilities and language centers. So that's what we're doing here.
You know, I think one reason why today we have trouble getting on with it is because we are able to communicate a lot more than we used to be able to. I'm totally convinced of that. At times I think, we spin-offs from the space program over since it started, 50 years ago or whatever. Well, we now have all these great ways to communicate. Well, that's personally not necessarily a good thing all the time. You ought to be able to stop talking about something sometime and just go get it done. And Jeff, I'm not sure. I guess I'm allowed to give an opinion.
So how important would you say is it to, I don't know whether to say establish or increase our ability to do animal experimentation on the International Space Station? I mean, people had talked about that originally, but our original planned capabilities have been cut way, way back. And I don't even know what the current capabilities are. I heard someone say Zippo. That's what I thought, but I didn't want to, say nothing if, in fact, somebody was actually planning something. But
we do have to correct that. There are capabilities for having mice on space. There's the AEM facility that is built in the U.S. that will house mice or rats, and then the Italian Space Agency will be launching in August the first flight of the mice drawer system, which has been built by Italy. We also have the capability for smaller animals, worms, of course, Drosophila. The Japanese have now decided to build an aquatic habitat in space. So it's everyone, I think, in the animal research community still really hurts over the loss of the CAM, which would have been a significantly larger capability. But there still is a capability for rodents in space. Well, the AEMs fly on shuttle and have flown over the last 10 years. The mice drawer system is going to station in August. And it will be on space station for up to 180 days. Oh, sure. Jeff asked the question about when the mice would be going to space station, and they'll be going in August, and they'll be on space station for up to 180 days.
I remember I used to be. I'll give you a break here. I used to ride aircraft carriers and for splashdowns of Apollo and Skylab, all the Skylab missions. I was on either the USS New Orleans or Yorktown or whatever. Back in early Apollo, we flew. It's called BioCore, I think was the name of it. We had one rodent, if I recall, in a canister or whatever, and with things planted in its head to try to trap, record, whatever cosmic sources and so forth. And one of my duties, once the command module got back on board the aircraft carrier, was to grab the BioCore and see if I could determine whether, because you couldn't see inside of it, whether the animal was still alive or whatever. And my procedure was to put my ear to it and just listen, see if anything was scratching around. Sure enough, it was still alive, and they took the poor little thing into Samoa and did some surgery on it. So that was its demise. Just thought I'd give you all a break. All right, that's where are we going from here? You guys didn't answer whatever the question was, you guys didn't answer. So can you answer it?
May I just, I would like to add one thing, that in Russia, the program of experiment on animal is going right from 1973. All our bions, photons, and a lot of foreign researchers are flying with us, including right from the beginning and very broadly American. And we had all species on board, including monkey, until '96. We got great and large experience on it. And unfortunately, the program was killed in '96, also because of political influences. But it is restarted now, and we have flying mice, rats, and I call this our ships Noel Arch, because there are all different species starting from the Drosophila. We don't restart monkey yet, but I'm sure that we will, and everybody is welcome.
Thank you.
Just a quick comment from Neurolab, and Jay may remember this moment. We were back in the lab doing some electrophysiology experiments with the rats that we had on board. And we were discussing whether or not the International Space Station would ultimately have the capability to do the level of sophistication in the science that we were able to do on board Neurolab, because of course extracellular electrophysiology within the cortex of vertebrates is very complex. Being able to do that in space was a remarkable achievement. And I would submit that as we go forward and look at ISS as this world-class orbiting laboratory, we truly need to consider and reconsider the benefits that are brought by doing research like this in these environments.
We just lost the interest to animal study. What is the...
Just a minute. And need Mike back up here in the back.
I said that just for a while we lost the interest in animal study, and I think it is very wrong, because medicine always, medical science always was developing based on animal study results.
Okay. Back over here, okay, and then back up here in the back. Yeah.
Fei Wang from NIH. I just have a follow-up question.
A little louder, please.
You can hear me?
Go ahead. Yeah.
Okay.
It's, part of it's me, but it's all right.
Okay. So when you bring animals up, do you train them? Because when you bring astronauts up, you train them. I'm serious, because what is the control here? That's my... It's probably
that's
question.
a great question, because one of the things we noticed on Neurolab is we flew a number of neonatal rats, and we noticed that the experienced mothers were much better at taking care of their neonatal rats than the inexperienced mothers. And needless to say, that was a training effect. It's very hard to provide the appropriate type of animal training to be able to go into that environment, although conceptually, if we thought about it, there are ways to do it. One of the things that's a little anecdote that it is quite interesting is the adult rats that we took into space learned to get around about as quickly as your average astronaut, and they pushed off with their hind paws and they would float along and grab on with their forepaws, and it was really quite remarkable to be able to see them learn that quickly in the microgravity environment.
Back up here in the back.
Larry, as everybody in this room knows, is with great trepidation that you contradict Inessa Kozlovskaya. But Inessa, we've stopped doing animal experiments in space for the moment, not because of lack of interest. Far from it. Within the scientific community, there is a huge interest in the same questions in fundamental biology, space biology, gravitational biology that we've discussed at panels over the years. What we've lost is the money. What we've lost is the up mass and down mass capability. What we've lost is the onboard facilities. Well, the interest is still there, barely. The crew members will be present to do increased experiments, And if it's within the capability of the various agencies to try to restore both the research funding and the onboard facilities and the access, I think we'll see a tremendous increase in the mature years of the station.
Yeah, I agree. And we're just getting there. We're not even to 6 people yet. And we had this thing called Columbia, which kind of slowed us down too. But you're right, it's the money.
While y'all are thinking, I got to add that I learned a long time ago that I mentioned a while ago about the politics and anything that you do, well, that ties into the money. And yes, I mean, we can do lots of things, you know, if we've got the resources to go do it. And therein lies generally now, today, a very constrained environment to do lots of this stuff. Bonnie? We've got about 10 more minutes of this.
Well, forgive me for pulling a circle around and bringing it back to my first question, because this is an operational question. As we proceed, let's say, to build a base on the moon, and we're talking 90 days, maybe even 180-day sorties, and we know that in a long-duration microgravity environment, we have disuse osteoporosis. It was part of my research. It's there. We're reporting about 1 to 1.5% bone loss per month after a certain threshold. My question then is, how do you know what protocol to use for mitigating disuse osteoporosis in a 1/6 gravity? Or do you learn it as you go? Or is it a parametric linear relationship, or is there a threshold? And how do you find that out before you go?
Yeah, I go back to the comment Walt made. We don't want to go and reproduce all this stuff to be able to go back to the moon. You know, I think my 2 cents worth are let's go before the 50th anniversary of Apollo, and let's acquire the data while we're there and be able to understand this phenomenon and measure the changes when we bring people back.
I wasn't suggesting we wait, but if we're going to learn it there, then we need to plan it now so we can, you almost have to have a laboratory there, because the concept of now down mass gets back played into the operational scenario. Where's the assessment going to be done?
You do the best you can in 0G. You figure out what you can do in 1/6G, which may be amazing, just having 1/6G. And then that will translate to Mars. So, base it on the moon. That's why I think you need to go back for long periods of time.
Well, I'm just thinking perhaps some of our...
Hold on just a second. We want to go through an interpreter here, so you'll need to talk to the mic, please.
Hi, Tom Lang from UCSF. This might be a good opportunity for some of our program managers from NASA and NSBRI to talk about the 1/6 gravity bed rest analogs that are being currently carried out.
Okay.
As well as animal work.
Let's see. Hank?
Thanks, Tom. There is a major initiative to get some predictive power on bone loss, both combined with the deconditioning of bed rest. And as you know, bed rest can be used to simulate 0G with a head down configuration, and we're currently trying to configure the bed rest to give a 1/6 gravity influence on the systems, particularly bone and muscle. It's a difficult problem because you get a little bit different response from cardiovascular system than you do with bone, and we're working through the problems associated with that. If we're successful, then we will be able to do a series of deconditioning studies that simulate 1/6G. It would give you some predictive value about which countermeasures are effective. I think that it is just a prediction, and the real data, the real truth would come from measuring returning crewmen from lunar missions and increasing duration. But I think it's important to make those predictions. And Bonnie, I doubt that it's linear, but we'll know a little bit of something. The other thing we're doing, of course, is to try to capture all the information in models that would explain something about the mechanisms, and those are the digital astronaut models. So that's one aspect of trying to capture the explanatory power of what we learn from our experimental data. And the other is trying to predict the work component and the force components of EVA, which may not be trivial with respect to how much loading the body gets. So those are the aspects of the research program that we're doing.
I would just submit.
Я бы хотел немножко тоже добавить.
I would like to add a few words.
Yes, sir.
Дело в том, что у нас вот в конце стола сидит Володя Титов.
We have Vladimir Titov here in the end of the table. He spent 1 year in space, and he kept his bone mass intact. Valery Palikov spent 436 days in space, and he was kind of okay. But in order to keep them intact, countermeasures will need to be refined. In a situation when the gravity is 1/6 only, it will be necessary to implement some countermeasures that will have to be defined. Without countermeasures, it is not feasible. As to the length of a mission, I believe the long-duration missions that we had on Salyut and Mir station actually proved that keeping the bone mass is possible, and lower the loss of minerals is also possible by using countermeasures. I believe it is good to use some medicinal substances that can help to keep bone mass intact.
I just had a quick comment to make it somewhat analogous to the animal research challenge on the station, and that is, if we think we have challenges with upmass scientifically to the station, wait until we get into Orion and lunar return. So from a scientific perspective, the challenge is out to the community, to all of you, to develop technology to enable us to seamlessly integrate the scientific research that needs to be done, the data collection that needs to happen during these missions with the mission architecture and the capability of the vehicle. And I'll give you a story from Neurolab. Bruce McNaughton was one of the investigators on Neurolab. Tremendously talented individual, and we went as a crew to see his lab, and he was doing extracellular unit recording from a part of the brain with tetrodes, these 4 electrodes attached together. And we walk into Bruce's lab, and he shows us his equipment. He's got a wall full of desktop computers stacked on top of each other to give him the computing power that he needs to be able to do this experiment. And we looked at this and said, "That's it?" He says, "Yeah." I said, "Bruce, it's the space shuttle. Okay, this ain't gonna fit." So the challenge is technologically, we know where we're going right now. We know what the upmass is going to be like. We know what the downmass is going to be like. To get us beyond doing pre and post science, and there's a lot of value in doing pre-flight, post-flight data recording. If you want to integrate the science into the mission, we've got to start developing the technology to do it.
They just presented at Aerospace Medicine last week, and it's about this big now, Dave. So that's the cool news.
Yeah, Neil Pellis from Johnson Space Center. Just a comment with regard to the relationship of G to biological responses that I think needs to come into the consideration here. And that is, the discussion of 1,6-G is always very fascinating because we only have a limited experience and we didn't do a lot of monitoring, which I agree that the way to do this is to monitor, begin to understand, and act based on the data that we can get. And whether that's from humans or animals, someone else is probably going to decide. But nonetheless, that's the first point. Second point is that when you look at biological responses, this is an interesting phenomenon. They almost all occur in a dose-response fashion in a sigmoid relationship and usually within 1 to 1.5 logs of normal. Okay, so 1,6-G is just above the first log, under G, 10 to the minus 1. It's just above that. The likelihood is that it's not going to provide a whole lot. And if it does, it brings what Dennis brought out about the model that they're looking at already and really emphasizes that that's going to be likely the possibility. there's no a priori reason for us to think that all systems of the body carry the same threshold for G operation. And so you could, in 1.6G, actually see discordant restoration of system function. And it could end up actually being a bigger problem than being in micro G, at least at the beginning, until we understand it and know how to deal with it. So those two considerations, I think, really need to be in the picture of the discussion that we have here.
Okay, down here in front, and then I'm going to front, back, and then we're done. Because I'm in charge until somebody runs me out of here. So go ahead.
I'm Sue Bloomfield from Texas A&M and also an NSBRI researcher. And there is indeed a fairly large research portfolio now devoted to specifically effects of 1/6 gravity. But I think everybody recognizes, whether they're working with the human or animal models for this partial weight bearing, none of them are perfect. None will suffice for all systems. And I think it was Don's suggestion that march forward, start collecting data as soon as you land on the lunar surface, and learn from that, assuming that, or with the hopes that none of any deleterious effects would be worse than we've seen with 0G, hopefully less severe, but then start learning from the get-go and collecting data. However, for that approach to work, we must solve the issues of privacy of data and data sharing for all those astronauts that are stepping on the lunar surface, if we're going to be learning actively from that experience. So it'd have to be a work in progress, but I think that's a smart approach.
Okay, so Kevin Fong, University College London. Given that this session is talking about what we've learned from ISS and moving forwards, I'd like to ask this question about the risk paradigm with respect to space medicine. Looking back now, do you think that the approach to space medicine risk on the space station, now that you've had 10 years of it, was excessively risk averse, accepted too much risk, was just right, or all of the above?
All right, we're going to, gentlemen, a few minutes and then we're done.
Just right.
Yeah, I would say just right too. Go ahead.
Is it because of the experience of Skylab, because of all the Russian work and all their space stations? Because of that, I think it's a pretty good stepwise approach to the evolution of our ARID that just went up there, our exercise countermeasures.
And the reason why we can say just right is we've had medical events on the space station, but we knew we would have medical events on the space station. The events we've had were within the scope of what we predicted and were within our ability to diagnose and treat. So I would say just right.
Okay, well, your summit is just beginning, obviously, and you're going to have today and the next few days to continue. Let me finish up by saying to you folks, I think what we need to do is we need to continue to find ways to take what exists across the entire international community, issues that we have, and we need to continue to try to find some way to come to common ground. I don't want to start a debate here, Smith, but I think we still argue about sleep shifting, do we not? I just, yes or no?
Yes.
Okay. So we argue about sleep shifting. Now, I would challenge the space medical community to, well, let's solve it internationally, just as a test case. And now, I don't.
We argue, but they're also different paradigms. We punish. There's ground crew to consider.
My point, Smith, is that this to me, I know it's not simple, but it's sleep shifting. There's not so. All right, I won't be so subtle. If we can't do that, we probably can't solve anything else that's a lot harder. So we got to figure out a way to do this as a community. So. Thanks for George. I want to thank you for inviting me to come down and be a part of this today. I'm going to go back to where we have our mission management team meeting here at 1:00. down at the MCC in Houston and see how things are going. Thanks to the panel. Very quickly, Don Pettit, raise your hand, Don. You know, this is if you saw this guy on campus somewhere, you'd think, in fact, I see him all the time, and I say, are you really an astronaut? He's got a ball cap in his pocket, by the way, which you'll probably wear on the way out of here, I suppose. And I gotta say something to Barbara, sitting over here, Barbara Morgan. Raise your hand, Barbara. I want to tell you that the Boise State baseball cap you gave me, I have a very, very dear friend who's a diehard Oklahoma Sooners fan. And so I wore it over to his house here this past fall, whatever, and boy, he really gave me a hard time. So I felt good about that. So, hey, thank y'all for allowing me to participate today, and thanks to the panel, and you enjoy the rest of the day. Thank you.